All right, should I call the meeting to order, Ryan? We ready?
Yes.
All right, this is the August 17th meeting of the Boston Region MPO Congestion Management Process Committee. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, veteran status, or background. To read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostonmpo.org/MPO_non_discrimination. I'll start with the introductions. Jay Monty, representing the city of Everett. I'm the chair of the committee.
Ryan Hicks, MPO staff.
Seth Asante, MPO staff.
Ryan, do you want somebody to do a roll call or just
We need some kind of prompt, Jay. So either roll call or just ask people to hand it off to somebody else.
Yeah, just hand it off to somebody else, please.
Sure. Well, I guess I'll go. So Leonard Diggins, our advisory council. I'll hand it off to Tegan.
Tegan Tyke, MPO staff. I'll hand it off to, let's see, Annette.
Annette Dempshire, MPO staff. I'll hand it off to Erin.
Erin McGuire, MPO staff. Let's see, Amira Patterson.
Good morning, everyone. Amira Patterson, Transportation Planner at the MBTA Advisory Board. I'll hand it off to Sarah.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Sarah Lee from Massport. I can't see the participants. Jay, I think, hasn't gone yet.
Actually, already went, but that's okay. Well, let's go to Ethan.
All right.
That's okay.
Morning, everybody. Ethan LaPointe, Boston Region MPO staff. I'll pass it off to Sarah Philbrick.
Good morning, everyone. Sarah Philbrick, MPO staff as well. I'll pass it over to Ronak. Oh, he left the meeting, maybe?
I'm here. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ronak Basu, Boston Region MPO staff. I'll hand it over to Hein. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
It's all good. Hein Kim representing BTD. I think I'm the last person in the roll call.
Yep.
As I'm missing.
Yeah. Anybody else who hasn't? Okay, I guess everybody. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, approval of the March 23rd, 2023 meeting minutes. And I'll make a motion for any comments or suggestions. None? All right, motion to approve the minutes. Anybody?
I'll motion to approve the minutes. Leonard Diggins, advisory council.
Second. Amira?
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Amira. All right, motion, next roll call, right?
Yep.
Okay. Actually, Ryan, the committee members are not, the MPO staff are not committee members, correct? So it's just, I think you can just do it a simple I, right?
Yeah, there's overlap, but not everybody who's on the MPO.
Right. All right, everybody who approves, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Aye.
Yeah.
All right, motion passes. Agenda item number 3, roadway pricing experiences workshop. So I'll turn it over to Seth and Ryan.
Good morning. My name is Seth Asante. In today's workshop, Ryan and I will present the results of interview personnel of roadway pricing program and seek input from the CMP committee. Next slide, please. The objectives of the interviews were to learn more about how pricing programs were created and implemented and the lessons we can learn from them. Also, the objectives for the study are to identify the MPO goals for roadway pricing and how to incorporate pricing into the MPO planning process. Next slide, please. There are 5 tasks in the study. Tasks 1 and 2 have been completed. Tasks 2, 3, and 4, which are highlighted in blue, are the focus of today's meeting. Next slide, please. Staff identified 13 roadway pricing programs in Task 1 and presented them for your feedback. Based on the feedback, staff selected 5 programs for further evaluations and interviews. Next slide, please. These are the 5 programs that staff selected for interviews. The Transportation Network Provider Surcharge, which imposes fees on TNP trips, such as Uber and Lyft, to the downtown Chicago area. The Minnesota DOT high occupancy toll lanes, which allow single occupant vehicle drivers to pay and use HOV lanes. The Central Business District Tolling Program, which is expected to toll drivers entering Manhattan Central Business District. The Bay Area Express Lanes, which tolls drivers that use express lanes in the San Francisco Bay Area. And the Penn Quarter Chinatown Parking Pricing Program, which sets parking rates based on demand. Next slide, please. After a city analysis noted a dramatic increase in TNP rides and a corresponding increase in congestion in the downtown Chicago area, the City Council approved a legislation in 2019 with major changes to the structure of TNP trip taxes. The program was designed to address congestion by incentivizing accessible and shared trips and addressing inequitable distribution of transportation options. The engagement efforts included communications with TNP providers and the public about the impact of TNP trips and the program benefits. The surcharge policy was to reduce trips with origin or destination in the downtown area. Next slide, please. In the first year of the program, it generated about $200 million, of which $60 million annually go to the Chicago Transit Authority. This low-cost program required no equipment installation, and the TNP companies collect the fees and remit it to the city. Transparent TNP trip data also allow verification, and the program required a small back office staff. Next slide, please. Underutilized HOV lanes and environmental concerns drove congestion pricing in Minnesota. After several failed attempts in the early 2000s, a high-level task force was assembled to evaluate pricing strategies and benefits. The efforts of the task force enabled legislation authorizing the State Department of Transportation and the Metropolitan Council to study and implement congestion pricing. The program was created to reduce congestion and improve reliable travel times. The engagement plan took a grass-top approach led by the high-level task force. There was extensive engagement with policy and decision makers, and also the public. Communications was centered on how pricing works and benefits, and the tolling policy promotes high occupancy vehicles and faster and more reliable trips. Next slide, please. The program reduced congestion, improved travel time, and enabled transit service improvements. This program is assets heavy and high cost. It requires hot lane conversions and adding new lanes. Also, it required tolling and road infrastructure. This is the network of the hot lanes. The purple color represents hot lanes, existing hot lanes, and the green color represents potential future projects for expansion of the program. Next slide, please. Several attempts at congestion pricing in the New York City area failed because of lack of a legislative support. In 2019, due to budget shortfalls, the state legislation authorized the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, MTA, to implement the Central Business District tolling program. The program was to address congestion in the Manhattan Central Business District in a manner that will generate revenue for MTA capital projects. The sponsors of the program have completed environmental assessments and received a finding of no significant impact from federal agencies. They did conduct extensive public engagement, coordination with decision makers, and meetings and hearings for environmental justice populations. The tolling policies address concerns about environmental justice populations. Next slide, please. The affected area is below 60th Street in Manhattan Central Business District. The program is expected to reduce traffic and energy consumption and improve regional air quality. This program is low cost and asset light, requiring no expansion or widening, only tolling equipment installation, and also linked to the Easy Pass Air program. Next slide, please. The Bay Area Express Lane program was developed due to state legislation, allowing the State Department of Transportation and regional transportation agencies to implement roadway pricing strategies. The program was to reduce congestion, improve reliable times, and person throughputs. They engaged extensively with regional transportation boards. They held public meetings and hearings and incorporated pricing into long-range transportation plans. The tolling policy promotes high occupancy vehicles and transit use, and also clean fuel vehicles and electric vehicles. Next slide. This program is assets heavy and high-cost program. It requires HOV lane conversion and adding new lanes. Also, it requires technology, toll, and roadway infrastructure. This is the network for the Bay Area express lanes. The black color indicates the existing express lanes, and the light green color represents potential or possible future projects. Next slide. The DC Council authorized and permitted the Penn Quarter Chinatown parking pricing program. The goal of the parking pricing program were to improve parking experience for customers, reduce congestion, and also use technology to implement parking management solutions. They engaged stakeholders early in the process to convey benefits and obtain consensus. Their parking rate policy promotes demand-based parking management solutions. Next slide, please. The program improved parking experience by increasing parking availability and use of low-demand parking spaces. It also reduced circling for space, double parking, reducing congestion, and increasing safety. In addition, the program encouraged travel by transit and bicycle during peak period. This program is low cost and asset light and requires a small back office staff. Next slide, please. These are the significant challenges that were identified in the interviews. Balancing equity concerns, such as giving discounts, credits, and exemptions, and collecting revenue to accomplish program objectives was a challenge. Getting political buy-in from the public and also acceptance. All the programs needed legislation authorizing their implementation. Communicating benefits to the public and politicians. For example, the role of congestion pricing in addressing critical problems such as congestion, air pollution, and energy use. Conducting environmental assessments. It can be challenging due to technical capability of staff and uncertainty in travel behavior models. COVID-19 pandemic impacted the resiliency of the programs. Mitigating adverse geographical impact was also a challenge. For example, equity, traffic diversion, and inequitable distribution of transportation options. Building inter-agency collaboration on pricing was also a challenge. For example, obtaining agreements on regional goals, revenue allocation, and toll policy. And lastly, navigating state and federal statutes that limit allocation and distribution of revenue. Next slide. These are the opportunities we identified from the interviews. The program creators were using roadway pricing to address several problems and issues. To fund transportation, public transportation to address equity issues. Link pricing goals to reduce congestion, pollution, and energy use. Change driver behavior and encourage shifts to transit and active transportation modes. Take advantage of technologies to use pricing to manage congestion effectively. Support economic vitality, improving reliable travel times for goods delivery. Support sustainable multimodal transportation, like funding walking and biking projects, and expanding data monitoring in before and after studies. Next slide, please. These are the lessons we can learn from the pricing programs that we interviewed. They are key to implement successful program. 1, political leadership and legislation is essential. 2, involve environmental justice communities early in the process. 3, emphasize engagement for underrepresented communities. 4, public engagement and education are keys to success. 5, show that revenues uses are beneficial, transparent, and linked to transit improvements. Next slide, please. 6, pair pricing programs with alternative travel modes to ensure that the program is successful from day one. 7, focus on goals and benefit rather than revenue when communicating to the public. 8, use transparent data to aid transportation decisions. 9, evaluations are key to maintaining the effectiveness of a pricing project. And last, have adequate and specialized staff to conduct environmental assessments. I would like to pause here to see if there are any questions about the interviews before we move on to the next steps. Okay, if there are no questions, I will hand over to my colleague Ryan Hicks to do the next steps.
Next slide.
Actually, you know what? I do have one quick question.
Okay.
I was going to say I only had comments made, but in the Chicago study, when you talk with folks, was there any indication that maybe the price point that they set on the surcharge, was too low? Because it did mention that it didn't reduce or seemed to have negligible to no effect on the usage of TNCs.
Yeah, in the Chicago TMP program, according to our interviews, the program is not moving the needle to reduce congestion in the way that it's supposed to be. And it came up that the pricing was low. So one of the things that we learned was that to move the needle on congestion, you have to price the program in such a way that it will have impact on congestion.
Yeah, so, if I could add, one challenge that happened was a lot of these programs couldn't get political buy-in with having a high congestion fee. And that is a major challenge that's listed, that we listed. And that was one of the challenges that Chicago ran into. They even recommended that maybe the fee should be $10 to $15, for example, rather than $1.75.
Thanks. And sorry if you mentioned that I had to kind of like shift locations while at the beginning of your presentation, Seth. And yeah, I kind of noticed me. And then when we were doing when the state did the Future Transportation Board a while ago, that there are a lot of people who were paying a lot, for like a subscription to TNC or an alternative to the T, and these prices were so much higher than what we were charging, to access the T. So that was just curious. And so anyways, that's it. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, Ryan.
All right. Thank you, Seth. Your presentation was excellent as usual. If anybody has any questions for Seth or myself, feel free to follow up with us after the meeting because I know we're limited on time and everything. So what Seth presented was task 2 of the roadway pricing project, where we interview stakeholders, and he interviewed 5 stakeholders. Now we're moving on to task 3 and task 4. Task 3 will consist on identifying MPO goals for the roadway pricing project. And what I'd like to do is have an open discussion for about 10 minutes or so to just pick your brains to see what your thoughts on what the goals should be for roadway pricing for the Boston Region MPO. And we're seeking input from CMP committee members and MPO board members, as well as everyone that's attending today. Next slide. So I'm just gonna, for this section, I'm just gonna present 2 questions, and they're more or less open-ended. And I'll just like to see if I could create an organic discussion with these questions. Which of the following are the most important goal? Is the most important goal for roadway pricing? Is it A, to raise revenue, B, to reduce congestion, C, to provide disadvantaged communities with more transportation options, D, to preserve transit, E, to support economic growth, or F, to increase person throughput, or G, other? If there's anything that's not listed on this list, please feel free to present it as well. So. Leonard?
Yeah, so look, I'm going to support E because I think from E, you can get all the others, and so that's why I went for that one. It's a little vague, but you can, if you say you're supporting economic growth, then part of that will involve raising revenue, reducing congestion, providing disadvantaged opportunities. It gets to all the others, so that's why I choose that one. But if that's a little evasive, then if I had to pick one of the others, then I would say provide disadvantaged communities with more transit options, because I think that will increase not only human potential, but also it will help the economy. But so that's that. But I certainly have some other comments based on the things that were said. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. Jay?
Yeah, Lynn hit it nail on the head. I think I agree 100%. Add to that, I think what came out in your research, and perhaps not surprisingly, is that the biggest barrier to this is sort of political and public buy-in. And so if you're not providing a big benefit in the end, and I think that benefit is building economic growth and mobility, then it's not going to fly, right? If we're just talking, if we try to sell something like this to just reduce congestion or raise revenue, I think it's dead on arrival. But if you look at other successful programs that have implemented a fee for a service, and that could be a gas tax, could be bridge tolls, highway tolls. There's always been a benefit to folks, to users for that, and that was what sort of made it politically palatable. And sort of to Lynn's point, I think if you sell it on that kind of growth and providing more transportation options to disadvantaged communities, but also everybody, then the rest follows, right? So.
All right.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to agree with all of my colleagues here definitely in support of providing disadvantaged communities with more transportation options. I definitely agree with Len that that could include a lot of the other important bullet points, such as like preserving transit is in support of economic growth. That's going to then lead to an eventual raise in revenue and reducing congestion, which is a major factor for Boston. That's a major key. But also I wanted to add in an item for G for other. Transparency, I think, is really important for the MBTA at this point so that riders can trust the system and ensure that it's going to give what it is offering. So yeah, I definitely agree with all of these bullet points and think they're all important. But let's definitely focus on supporting economic growth and providing disadvantaged communities with more transportation options.
Excellent suggestion. There was actually one program that actually used transparency with their data to actually prove their point to preserve their program. So, are there any other comments as far as most important goals? Are there any suggestions that are not on here as far as goals? So.
Hi,
Yeah.
just would like to chime in that I would support B, reduce congestion, and also reducing congestion in a way that it encourages mode shift.
Yes, that is a very important one. What we need to do in most cases, if we just remove a few vehicles off the road, we could dramatically improve congestion, and that goes with shifting people to transit or maybe active transportation such as walking or biking. All right, if there are no more comments on this question, I will go to the next question. Thank you. So this ties in with the goals, the 6 goals that we have for our LRTP, long-range transportation plan. So I'm asking another open-ended question, and about which one of these 6 goals does it tie in with the most? And we can definitely discuss if there are multiple goals that that roadway pricing ties in with. Definitely discuss all that applies. We have a choice of equity, safety, mobility and reliability, access and connectivity, resiliency, and clean air and healthy communities. Jay Monty?
So I think it only fits most of these goals if you are able to generate revenue to invest in other modes, right? So it's only equitable because if what roadway pricing does is it reduces the number of vehicles on the road, and that's all it does, then it's actually kind of reducing mobility. So in order to increase mobility, you've got to then invest in transit. If you want to increase equity, you've got to invest in transit access and resiliency, same thing, right? So it only works with a follow-on investment in these other things. I don't think it by itself, roadway pricing by itself does not automatically achieve most of these.
Lynn?
Yeah, so I agree with Jay, but just making it hard on myself if I were to have to answer your question without any other without saying anything else. I think I'd have to go with 3. But I agree with Jay. Then maybe when we get to the end of this, I could back up and make one more comment on the previous questions. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, and in addition to that, I identified about 15 objectives that that come from the LRTP that would be related to roadway pricing, but I don't think it's realistic to use all 15 of them for when we are developing our goals. Are there any other comments on how this fits with the LRTP? With the LRTP goals? Okay, in that case, we'll move on. Thank you, Aaron. Looking at the roadway pricing goals was task 3 for the roadway pricing project. Now we kind of want to seek input for task 4, which is incorporating roadway pricing into the MPO planning process and also doing roadway pricing assessments as well. And this is basically implementation and to discuss what our role should be for implementation and then what steps should be done as far as implementing roadway pricing in the Boston region. All right, so my first question that I'm going to ask is, what would your priorities be on early communication and engagement with the public about roadway pricing? And then in addition to that, what forms of communication channels would be appropriate? For example, do you think RTAC will be appropriate? MAPC sub-regional groups, maybe some focus groups, or maybe additional workshops? Lynn?
Well, the advisory council is never going to turn down an opportunity to interact on this. So yeah, come early, come often. But in addition to that, I definitely think you should reach out to the sub-regions, and help them, get them to help you engage with the electeds in their municipalities. And I think the way to engage electeds on this is to do it in do it one-on-one as much as you can, because you don't want to force electeds to take positions, especially early on, just get their input, listen to them. It'll take a lot more time, but you'll get a lot more input, and certainly those who may be negatively inclined, if you don't force them to take positions in a wide public forum, it's easier for them to change their minds. So definitely engage. And you've probably thought about this already. The Joint Transportation Committee, State House, I think Senator Crichton would be big with this, and probably Representative blanking out his name, but the House Chair, and of course the Secretary of Transportation, see how they're thinking about this. I present this to them, and then say, look, we want to have a follow-up conversation with you on it, and then based on how things go with the sub-regions, then we could develop a strategy for reaching out to more electeds across the MPO. But we really would like to build a big groundswell support for this. And as far as other members of the public, it said talk to EJ communities early in the process. I would say engage them at the very beginning of the process, and maybe in order to help people to think about it, it might be good to try to present some ways that we might go about doing this, because sometimes it's just kind of hard. If it's just a concept, with no real structure to it. I'm not saying this well, but I guess what you want to do is give examples, and so it could very well be extensions of examples that are in the study. So I'm going to stop. Let someone else talk. Thank you.
Excellent answer, Lynn. And then this, and Lynn already provided a little bit of background on it, so I'll just ask the second question. What would your priorities be on exploring the effects of roadway pricing on equity populations in the Boston region? Does anybody have any answers, any comments, any suggestions with that question?
I think it's a question of how do you want to measure, mobility, right? And there's the detractors of congestion pricing will say, well, if you make it harder for folks who are already lower income, who don't have good transit, it makes it harder for them to drive to the job, if that's what they're doing, then you're being inequitable, right? I think we're in our heads, we think, oh, we're gonna use this to invest in transit and create more mobility. I think it has to be to a big picture. What does this actually do to overall mobility? Like, does it actually increase it, decrease it for these folks to make it easier or harder for them to get those jobs? Because I said earlier, there's like multiple steps to this to be successful. It's not just putting a price on the road. So I think it has to be taken from the big picture like that.
Absolutely, that's an excellent answer. And one of the things we have to be careful of is, are there any adverse effects towards the EJ community, for example? And we have to be very, very careful about that. Lynn?
Yeah, and along with the negative effects, as pointed out in one of the cases, there was concern about diversions from the routes that are toll to other parts of the community, which can affect EJ communities and non-EJ. You might find that the non-EJ communities would scream a lot more loudly about it, but then we have to be careful. Just because we're not hearing from the community about the concerns doesn't mean that it is something that couldn't happen. So yeah, there's something else I can say. I forget, so I'll stop. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Next slide.
Oh, I remember what it was.
So
quickly, can I just say
go ahead.
Yeah. So the other thing is that we have to be, as it said in one of the options, you have to have a alternatives available on day one, and that's crucial. And so the key is that we have got to get our transit system back up and running, even better than it was before the pandemic. We can't have a situation where people are waiting a very long time for trains, and it doesn't matter if we don't have a lot of people in trains. Once we can get the staff to start running the trains at a rapid rate, we got to get that back up, because I think every study will tell you the elasticities when it comes to service are pretty high, and so you can't disincent people off the roads without having something else for them to go to at the very beginning. So essentially, it's one of those: if you build it, it will come. But if you don't build it, they're never going to get off the road. So that's it. Thanks.
Yes, excellent answer. And that's one of the things we want to be careful of, because if you don't have a day one alternative with public transportation or active transportation, you're really taking away an option from people, not giving people an option. So we have to be careful about that. Yeah, we have a few minutes left, so I'm just going to run quickly through these next couple questions. So what will your priorities be on using the regional model to study benefits and effects on roadway pricing? As you know, we have the travel demand model that we use in-house for many NPO activities. So.
Oh, well, Marty's not here for us to beg him to do as much as he can with us. It's like, where's Marty on this? So definitely talk with Marty this week. We are working on the new model, and he's interested in doing some, I forget the term for it, but where you can kind of test various variables in order to see what their impact are on other elements of the model. And what I had asked them to look at was the effect of headways on the usage of transit, and then what impact that might have on other modes. So I guess we could do the other. It's just I'm not sure if we have the capacity built into the model to look at congestion pricing. I just don't know. I should know, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's a very good question. There was some modeling that was done for other congestion pricing programs that we interviewed, but to the technical extent of the model that was done, I'm unsure of, but there is some degree of modeling that can be done.
Yeah, I just meant with our model though. I mean, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure they do. I just don't know if TDM 23, I mean, has that capacity built in, but if it doesn't, I'm sure Marty can build it in, you know, it's just a matter of time and resources. He certainly has the intellect to do it.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I just want to say, I saw Mira's comment there, which I think was a good one, saying, there's a capacity question here, right? Like,
Mhm.
before the pandemic, the T was running essentially at capacity, in terms of staff and trains and tracks, right? So if all you do is charge for more to drive and there's no capacity to absorb mode shift, then what's really going to change other than you're maybe raising some revenue? So I keep coming back to this idea that the roadway pricing is almost like it comes after you've got a plan for something else. Like it comes after you've got a plan for regional rail or a plan for expansion of the T or bus network. That it's a tool to support those in the long term. But it's the second step, it's not the first step. Because you don't currently have the capacity in the system to absorb kind of your desired goal of getting cars off the road.
Thank you, Jeff. Steve?
Hi, I'm sorry I was late here. I was trying to wrap my head around. Can we go back to that slide on the long-range transportation plan? How it meets the goals of the long-range transportation plan, right? So I don't think we didn't come up with any, like none of these really jump out at you and saying, okay, roadway pricing fit best with. And because I think it's like a two-step thing, and they really should fit all of them. I mean, why are we even doing this if something doesn't jump out? Roadway pricing reduces congestion, and when you reduce congestion, then all of these things apply. Particularly safety, less congestion, more safety. Certainly, mobility and reliability is increased when you reduce congestion, accessibility, and connectivity, because you just get there. And resiliency certainly applies, because getting automobiles off the road is an important part of resiliency and an important part of clean air and healthy communities. The equity part is actually works in many ways, because the people that are using the roads now, the most of them are now paying for them the most. So I think we have to emphasize all of these, and you can't really pull out any one of them. Roadway pricing, and this is what this is all about. Roadway pricing reduces congestion. When you reduce congestion, then it meets all of these goals, all 6 of them. And I think that's the important thing we have to emphasize. And it just doesn't jump out at you right away. That's why it took me so long to say, okay, why aren't we seeing this? Roadway pricing reduces congestion. Reducing congestion meets all 6 goals here.
Thank you for your comments, Stephen. Yeah, so we're running really low on time, so Lynn will be the last comment. And then if you have anything to say about the last question, which dealt with tying it in with the long-range transportation plan, like what role the roadway pricing should have with the long-range transportation plan. Please feel free to answer. Yeah,
I was going to say just back up one more slide, but I could do this in one sentence, because I have to say this in every meeting. One of the goals should be how do we change the way that we approach transportation, being access to our transportation networks, one where it's pretty much a transit network and freight network. So just price access to the whole transportation network as if it were a transit system. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that will wrap up our meeting. Yeah, because we're out of time. However, if there are any comments on any of this material that we covered during this meeting, because either that you weren't able to send, because we didn't have time or, feel like it was the moment to speak up, feel free to contact us, and we'll definitely even set up a private meeting with people if they have any additional comments, or we can respond to their emails. So the next steps would be to wrap up the project. We will tie in task 3 and task 4 and complete those, and then task 5 will be completing the documentation. So this should be presented to the NPO in some point in October, more than likely. So, all right. The Boston Region NPO meeting will follow this meeting. So I guess we will end the meeting.
Motion
All
to
right,
adjourn,
thanks,
Jay.
Ryan. And take a motion to adjourn.
Motion so made.
I'll second it. All right. See you guys
See you
in
in
a
a little
minute.
bit. Okay, bye.